Wow. Just wow. This movie is so amazing. I struggled to put it into words. I feel like there's going to be so many things I'm still going to miss in this review because I feel like I'm still processing it. And until I've seen it like maybe 4 more times, I don't think I'll actually be able to really fully appreciate what Oppenheimer does. But we're going to make an effort, you know? We're going to make an effort. I've seen it once so far. I'm going to try to go back and watch it, more of it. But for now, we're going to make an effort based on what we have. All right. Welcome to my Oppenheimer review. One of the things that I wanted to touch upon that I didn't really get to talk about in my reaction video, my non-spoiler sort of thoughts on the movie, is the perspectives in this movie. So that's obviously kind of a spoiler. So here's that warning, that spoiler warning. We're getting into spoilers, if there is such a thing for a historical drama, because we're actually talking more about how you experience the film, which I think you want to be fresh for you. So if you haven't seen it yet and you think that you might see it and you want the best experience, I would recommend not watching this and go watch it first and then come back. If you're still here, let's talk about perspectives. So the really cool thing about this movie is apparently the script for this movie was actually written in first person, which makes a lot of sense based on the way the story is told here. So we actually have we have a few different times that we visit, and it's not a linear story because, of course, Nolan is just, I feel like, loves telling us a non-linear story, which makes the story so much powerful. And it's cool that even when it comes to storytelling, the way he looks at it is not just like, what's the story and how will that impact people, but like, what order do I tell the story in to make it the most impactful? So we do jump around a little bit. It might seem like at first the color is the past and the black and white is the future, but pretty soon that feels like it's becoming a bit muddled. And what's actually happening is you're getting sort of 2 different perspectives. So something that I realized while I was watching it is obviously the color is supposed to be Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer, that perspective. So we're getting the Oppenheimer perspective. And then the black and white is RDJ's Strauss perspective, who I think the color versus non-color is also supposed to speak a little bit to the difference in these people's perspectives, where I feel like Oppenheimer is kind of this character who's a little bit more, provides all sides of a point and doesn't really choose one way or the other strongly how he thinks or feels on something. He tends to be a little bit more neutral. Like with the nukes that we see in this, it's not that he is saying they shouldn't exist, and it's not that he is saying they should exist and they should be everywhere. He kind of is providing both sides where he can see the value of having them, but he can also see the harm that they cause, which is kind of the frustrating and awesome thing about the character, because it means that he's never really choosing a side based on a personal preference. But it's also frustrating because it reminds me of that line in Alexander Hamilton where Hamilton is talking to Burr or singing to Burr, really, and he says, "If you stand for nothing, Burr, what'll you fall for?" Or something like that. And I feel like that is so the thing that people feel frustrated about with Oppenheimer, because like Teller says, you can't get a read on the man. And so I think the color being his perspective is supposed to be about this idea of how he kind of sees the world a lot differently than someone like Strauss does. Whereas Strauss kind of sees it like black and white. Villain, hero, you know what I mean? Good, bad. He sees the world more in that two-tone way. And I think so it's not just speaking towards whose perspective it is, but kind of what are those perspectives. So all of the stuff that we see with the black and white is stuff that is from RDJ's perspective, and is also kind of stuff that Oppenheimer wouldn't have known because it wasn't something that he was let in on. It's something he was a part of sometimes, but he wasn't aware of the perspective. Which is also really interesting when we examine this idea of the reveal, sort of with Einstein, with Strauss, and how that starts off his vendetta against Oppenheimer throughout the film, which I'd also just like to add, I feel like my reviews are very much a non-linear story. So I hope you enjoy following me on this journey. I'm going to take us on a little ride. Not really going to touch so much on the overall story plot because one, it's historical, so we already kind of know what happens, but two, this is more of a review of the type of storytelling and where it takes us than it is as much about the story. I will touch on that a bit, but this is very much a two-perspective review. So the Einstein reveal to me was interesting at the end because I already surmised when I saw that first conversation happening in the black and white between Einstein and Oppenheimer that it actually had nothing to do with straws. And at the end of the film, that's what's revealed to us, of course. But I thought that reveal was so interesting because I feel like no matter which perspective you're kind of more invested in throughout the film, or the way that you see the film, for most people, that reveal is going to be interesting. It was interesting for me as someone that already anticipated that the interaction was actually between what Oppenheimer and Einstein said to each other. Now, I actually thought it was because Einstein was mad at Oppenheimer for ultimately creating the A-bomb and just didn't like really want to talk to him, but that's not exactly what it was. But it was in relation to sort of that, obviously. So for me, the surprise was a little bit more like seeing that other perspective of it and realizing that for Strauss, this is the moment when really his hatred, his targeting of Oppenheimer starts. So that's the inciting incident. And I never picked up on that until we came back to sort of his story and his motivations. I definitely picked up on the other one when with the isotopes, but I didn't pick up on that one at the beginning. So I thought that was interesting when you realize how important that moment is for him as well. And if you look at it the other way, where if you're focused on the, oh yeah, that obviously really upset Strauss, but you weren't as much aware of like the connection between Oppenheimer and Einstein there, then for you, the revelation, the idea that it's not about you is probably going to be an interesting concept when you revisit and get to see the Oppenheimer perspective of that conversation. Speaking of perspectives, which really is, to me, so much what this movie is about, the thing that I love about it is that it is a very American film, but there's also international perspectives peppered in, and I honestly would be super interested to see more international perspectives on this story and seeing it also made me want to learn more about how other people felt about all of this and like what was happening for all these other countries at the same time, which I think is really cool because it is very American, but it actually makes me want to like have more of an international perspective. Not to say, I mean, I'm not American, I am Canadian, but even just someone who's in North America, I think it's really hard sometimes for us to think outside of our bubble. And I like that this movie invited me to do that. And I was also curious to be like, I wonder what other countries thought of this movie. It turns out there are certain countries that didn't get this movie. Like, I don't think Japan picked this one up, which honestly, yeah, that makes sense. The scene with them deciding like which city they're gonna drop the bomb on was so hard for me to watch, and just how kind of almost lighthearted of a conversation that becomes. With them saying, you know, oh, we shouldn't, maybe not on Kyoto because it's like culturally significant, and also like, oh, we honeymooned in Kyoto. I was like, what is happening? That it instantly, just when they decided to have the list, just when they pulled out the list, I started to cry because I knew what was coming historically, and I was just like, how could this be such a simple conversation? Like, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. And I think the other power of this movie is kind of the fact that we don't see those things happening. We hear about them happening, and it's almost like the absence of us getting to see them that is more upsetting, if that makes sense. Because it's we're seeing people's reaction to what's happening and focusing more on that. And getting to see how other people are thinking about it, and the idea of these scientists not even knowing when things were happening really, and then just being surprised with a phone call when there are thousands of people that were also just like killed is like, I don't have words for that. That's so powerful. And it's so fascinating to me that it's almost like the absence of us seeing the terrible nature of this event that happened can be just as, and in some ways more impactful for us seeing how it affected people that were involved in the project, I guess, in the Manhattan Project. One thing that I really felt when I left this film was a pull to make movies, which oftentimes when I leave a Nolan film, I feel that pull, especially lately, especially like probably within the last 8 years of my life leaving a lot of his films. I've wanted to make a movie, or maybe like 5 years even, like, I don't know. I think it all really kind of started with Tenet for me. That was a movie that made me like I left it and I was like, I need to make a film like this, because I just think it's so interesting, the characters that he explores and their stories. I want to be those characters. I want to play those characters as an actor. And a lot of the times the male leads in the film are the one that I want to be. And it makes me want more of that for like women in cinema. Like, I just want in film there to be more roles that are this complex, that are this flawed, but these people are still, you know, in their own way a hero, but they're not perfect at all. In fact, they're the opposite. I feel like it's really hard with female protagonists to strike a balance, because if you go too flawed one way, it's like no one likes your character. And if you go too good another way, it's like your character also falls flat. And I just feel like Nolan is so good at striking this balance, but a lot of the times, even the female characters that are in his films, not all of them, not saying that, and I'm not saying that like this is necessarily even a bad thing, it's just more something that I've observed that I'd love to challenge more, which is this a lot of the female characters just end up being tied to male characters. And it tends to be romantic, it's not always romantic, but I would love to see more of that sense of what the protagonist has for like a female character. I think that could be really cool. And it just inspires me to want to be the person to create that, honestly. I love to write and I love to act, and I have always been intrigued by the sense of directing, although I find it very intimidating. So the thing that I love about films like this is that it comes out sort of making me feel rejuvenated, recharged, and excited to potentially make a film myself like this. This film is so fantastic because of all of these characters and the complexity that we see in them and in their relationships with one another and in the way that the story is even told to us. And it just makes me love so much this idea of what is film. I could keep going on. I have a lot of other notes even, but I feel like I've talked enough, and those are kind of the main points that I wanted to get across. Yeah, I guess let me know what are some of the things that you really took away from this film. Honestly, although I'm focusing mostly on Cillian Murphy and RDJ, Robert Downey Jr. in this review, and Nolan's direction, everyone in this film was amazing. And I think, honestly, everyone that was part of the production deserves like a giant round of applause, because there's so many people that go into making a film. And although this is clearly Nolan's vision, I'm sure he also understands the level of work that goes into every single position on a set, because he just seems like a man who is very much aware of what he's making. So honestly, round of applause all the way around. If anyone that was involved in this production deserves that, because you all crushed it, you all worked so hard, and I just want to say, honestly, thank you for making a film like this that can inspire people like me who are out here working in this profession to want it even more, because that is what drives us to make film. Don't mind my Tamagotchi beeping. That's all I have to say. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm going to stand with the rating I gave it before. I'm going to give it 10 fedoras out of 10, baby. Visually, from the sound perspective, from everything that's happening on screen, the way the story is told, the writing, every element of this film is perfect. And I think it deserves that 10 out of 10. Yeah, I really think there's almost nothing that I can say that's constructive. I'm just gonna make sure. I mean, I missed things, but I don't really have a lot to say that's constructive. Everything was pretty perfect. So just keep being perfect, I guess, and being flawed at the same time, which is what makes the perfection. It's like flawed perfection. It's great. And I love it. Oh, one more thing. The practical effects. Thank you. Thank you for using practical effects. Thank you. It looks so much better, and I'm just so happy that this film had almost no CG. Actually, I don't even think it had any CG, to be honest. I don't know if it did. Was there any CG used? Let me look it up. Did Oppenheimer use CGI? So they didn't use CGI for the bomb explosion, which I knew. Yeah, and I don't think there's any CGI in this film, which I definitely got a sense of it, and it speaks a lot more to the power when you can just make things be real. and I know there's still movie magic involved, but special effects should not be underrated, especially today. They really ground a film a lot more. So, thank you. And I guess I should say stay nerdy. All right. Bye.